The Long Road by Wolfland. Following Drake's directions to yet another room in the League building, Stephen paused, his hand on the knob of the door. League stylist. He'd always assumed that what Drake wore during the publicly televised matches was simply what the former sailor had in his wardrobe, not something appointed to him by someone else. Although from the way Drake scowled at the term stylist, Stephen figured it probably was a little of both. Not one too keen on fashion himself, he hoped he might have the same luck in not getting pushed into something outlandish or impractical. And so, with a determined look on his face, he swung the door open. I knew it! For the second time that day, Stephen's jaw hit the floor. The immaculately dressed duo waiting beyond the threshold was easy to instantly recognize. Standing side by side with his master was Wallace. I knew it'd be you, said Wallace with a smirk. Why are you here? Don't be so dense. As a contest performer extraordinaire, Master Hoenn has been a style advisor for the League for years. He's helped to build the image of several of Hoenn's champions. Of course, when I heard he was being called to assist a new champion, I asked to join him, and he agreed to let me tag along this time, since, well, I must confess I had to see it with my own eyes, just to be sure. Congratulations, by the way. And my congratulations as well, said Hoenn, giving a formal bow. After your victory at the gym, it was only a matter of time before we were to meet again here at the League. I very much look forward to seeing the rest of the highlights from your championship match. Thank you, Stephen replied with a nervous smile, recalling what Drake had said earlier about the matches being recorded for posterity, and also publicly. Hoenn had said the rest of the highlights. He hoped there wasn't anything too embarrassing in the video footage. Now then, Hoenn's words startled Stephen from his thoughts. It is our responsibility to prepare you for the public eye, to take the raw potential you represent and polish it to the brilliant luster fit for a champion. Right, said Wallace as he produced a tablet from beneath his cape. You've seemingly got a good start, but it's rather drab. Spinning the device around for Stephen to see, Wallace pulled a face at the still frame taken from one of the previous day's battles. Stephen stared at a picture of himself, standing tall in the trainer's box, hands swept wide in what he assumed was a command to one of his Pokémon. He finally understood where Roxanne was coming from with her suggestion. He didn't look half bad battling in a suit. You look like a businessman, not a world-class trainer. Flinching as Wallace took the tablet back, he gave the water-type trainer an affronted look. What Wallace is trying to say, prodded Hoenn, is that we want to take your look and make it something special, something exceptional. Wallace nodded as he pulled out his stylus, a glint of excitement creeping into his expression as he focused back on the tablet. We need something that makes you unique, dazzling. Tell me, what makes you tick? Stephen blinked. I like rocks and... No! Absolutely not! Boring! We need something flashy, something stylish and sleek, something like... Wallace's eyes trailed down in thought. Something strong, yet graceful. Graceful? Oh yes! Hoenn's champion can't be clunky. They must shine. They must be cunning and deadly, with a kind heart and nerves of steel. Wait, steel! That's it! What's it? But Wallace was already off and running, stylus working feverishly across the tablet. It's got to be rich. You are royalty, after all. Stephen paled as Wallace continued to work. Flashes of himself dressed in the same Sutopolan finest he'd seen the pair wearing in Lily Cove, and he inwardly shuddered. If whatever Wallace was sketching had a cape... A bit of shine here, some polish there. Wallace continued to mutter to himself as he sketched, and Stephen soon became tired of the whole thing. Can't I just stick with a suit? It's rather grown on me. But Wallace ignored him, stylus still flitting across the tablet. "Top it off with a Rasboro classic." The red cravat was sketched in. "And I'd say you'll look delightfully regal, fit for a long reign atop the league." "Wallace, I'm not a king," Stephen groaned, visions springing up of cloaks and crowns, and too much gold, and, God forbid, crushed velvet. "Well, you have a right to act like one now. And there we have it." Wallace spun the tablet around. "What do you think? The perfect blend of strength and style, befitting Hoenn's top trainer." Stephen leaned forward to look at the screen, and incredulously, staring back at him was precisely what he had asked for. The suit was pristine black, straight-edged and sharply cut, and Stephen had to admit, it certainly didn't look like anything he'd seen at his father's office. Deep velvet lines hugged the seams, and silver embellishments glinted at the clasps and sleeves. In lieu of a traditional tie, a crimson cravat was tucked into a matching vest beneath. It was distinct, but not flashy, at least not to what Stephen had been expecting to see, and as unlikely as it would be that he'd pick something out like this for himself, he didn't find himself horribly opposed to wearing it either. He was looking the design over once more to see if he was really sure about all this, when Wallace's voice cut through his musings. "I'll take your silence as a good thing." "It's different," Stephen offered, handing the tablet back to Wallace. I know. Not quite your cup of tea. But don't worry, it'll grow on you, I promise. Besides, it'd be criminal for someone as handsome as you not to look this good otherwise." Brows knitted as he continued to ponder Wallace's stylistic choices. It took Stephen a moment before Wallace's words sunk in. "Did you just— Never mind what I just said! We've got to get your measurements!" And before Stephen could protest, Wallace grabbed him by the arm and whisked him away to meet with the tailor. When Wallace and Hoenn and the tailor were through with him, with reassurance that his suit would be ready by tomorrow's announcement, Stephen was directed yet again from room to room in the league, bouncing around in meetings about protocol and regulations and gym inspections and intra-league cooperation. And by the time Stephen's head began to spin, and he feared he may have gotten himself into more than he could handle, Drake gave him a reassuring pat on the back that he'd get the hang of things in no time. As thin as the veteran trainer's words felt, by the time Stephen found himself nearing the last stop of the day, the nervousness of the road ahead took a back seat to what lay in store for him tomorrow. The league's official announcement. It would only be a small affair, the live audience consisting only of reporters and league personnel, but still, the thought sent his stomach tumbling, especially when Drake had said there'd be no room to have Metagross on the stage with him. All eyes would be on him, and just like that, it felt like the day before his trainer school exam all over again. As he reached his destination, he rested a hand on the doorknob and paused, wondering if maybe he could have Metagross take his place at the announcement instead. He shook his head. There's no way Drake would go for that. Just why did he feel so overwhelmed all of a sudden? His hand tightened around the knob, suddenly reluctant to step through the threshold and claim the suite as his own. He knew he'd accomplished something most trainers only dreamed of. He was the champion. Yet why didn't he come out the other side feeling confident and carrying himself like the person that defeated the 5 most powerful trainers in the region? The nagging voice in the back of his mind began to grow, cutting through logic and reason alike to pinpoint the little bud of doubt that lingered there. He'd worked hard and had earned this, but what if he wasn't ready? The fierce rocking of Metagross's Pokeball against his side stopped him in his tracks. You're right. I can't think like that, Stephen sighed with a shake of his head, and the pulse of Metagross's presence dialed back just a bit. If I'm feeling the same way in the morning, you can yell at me again. He felt a surge of psychic reassurance at the back of his mind, and the mental notes that Metagross would make good on their deal. Drawing a steady breath, Stephen smiled. Metagross always seemed to know how to drown out the whispers of doubt. Satisfied that his starter's chastising had been appeased for now, the thought of finally having some time to rest and relax outweighed the dread of the following day, and he pushed the door wide as he made his way into the room. He only made it a few steps inside when he paused again. The league really was full of surprises. The Champion Suite was quite unlike the room he had stayed in the previous night. Its decor was rather understated, and the scale of the space held a much more intimate feel. The swaths of marble and velour were replaced by aged wood and worn leather. Although it was vacant of any of the former champion's things, save for the faint odor of pipe tobacco, Stephen had an inkling the overall look was due to Drake's influence. But it was far from a bad thing. He kinda preferred it that way. As much as he enjoyed marveling at beautiful stonework, there was something more appealing when it was found in a cave and not inside a building. There was something about these new quarters, something that put him at ease. And as he reached down for his pack that again had been delivered to the room, it struck him as to why. Everything at Evergrande felt larger than life. The lobby, the elite's chambers, the league building itself, they all were too spacious and too tall and too cold. And for the first time since arriving, the scale of the place finally made him feel like he belonged. It was cozy, but not cramped. Comfortable, but not excessive. As his gaze swept across the room, it landed on the hearth, and he smiled. There was just enough space. His partner materialized next to the armchair in a flash of light, its red eyes already finding his own, and he smiled. Metagross? He spread his arms wide. Welcome to our new home. The steel type hummed in response, a promise that if nothing else, it would make sure Evergrande was their home for a long time to come.